65 years ago today, God Almighty put me on this earth, and I believe it's to fight against this new world order. Thank you. We are being cornered like cattle into a pen, squeezed down, and we're never really going to be free people unless we're brave. Because this was only the land of the free as long as it was the home of the brave. And this started a long time ago with people that go back to the 4th century. Let me tell you about the flight of the Khazar warriors out of northern Turkey in 500 AD. They were a despicable bunch. You could go to the king of the Khazars and rent an army from him, an army of 40 or 50,000 men. But it didn't matter what kind of a deal you struck with their monarch. He wasn't called a king, he was called a shagan. Once the battle was done, they rape and pillage. Doesn't matter what kind of agreement you had with the king. That's the way it ended up. And so as a consequence, people in the area garnered a great deal of animosity for these Khazar warriors. And in 500 AD, they were driven out. And as they came down south out of Turkey, some fled to the west into Romania and Hungary and became the Gypsies. The rest followed their monarch, the Chagan, up into the steppes of Russia and north of there to the Caucasus Mountains. And as they settled in there, they quite easily enslaved the relatively peaceful agrarian Slavic folks that were indigenous to the area. Then they came under pressure to take sides in a growing contention around them. Coming down from the north was Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and coming up from the south was Islam. And they knew that if they succumbed to pressure from either of those to join their organization and embrace their philosophy, it would surely offend the other. And so what they did was a politically expedient maneuver. He called in all the religious leaders of the area, and he got their input, and after the input, he announced, for me and my people, and we're talking about 20 million people and about 4,000 nobility, for me and my people, we choose to become Jews. Now, this was not a heartfelt conversion. This was not something that was deep in their breast, that they felt they needed to make a conversion because they thought that was the proper way to serve the Creator. This was something that was done as a political expediency. And in the course of studying about their new religion, and you do have to study it even if you're only going to charade, it is absolutely necessary to study about it so that you can fake it. And in the course of doing so, they came across a character with whom they could truly identify. It was Lucifer, the morning light that fell from grace and became Satan, the adversary. And they formed an inner circle within Judaism dedicated to the forces of evil. Let's define terms. What is a Jew? If you look back in your Old Testament, your Bible, there was 12 Hebrew tribes. The 10 northern tribes were called the house of Israel. The 2 southern tribes were called Benjamin and Judah. More properly pronounced Judah, because we didn't get the harder sound to the J until about 200 years ago. So this is what I would call real Jews, people from the tribe of Judah.
In the time of Bible history, there was a geographic area known as Judea. Judea was a province of the Roman Empire. Now, a person who lived in Judea was known as a Judean, and in Latin it was Judaeus, and in Greek it was Judaios. Those are the 2 words, Greek and Latin, for a Judean. Now, the word in Latin and Greek, there is no such letter as J. And the first syllable of Judaeus and Judaius starts Jew. Now, when the Bible was written, it was first written in Greek, Latin, Canantish, Syriac, Aramaic, all those languages. Never was the word Jew in any of them, because the word didn't exist. Judea was the country, and the people were Judeans, and Jesus was referred to only as a Judean. I have seen those the earliest scripts available. I'm always at the American Bible Society, and there was no such thing. In 1345, a man by the name of Wycliffe in England thought it was time to translate the Bible into English. There was no English edition of the Bible, because who the devil could read? It was only the educated church people who could read Latin and Greek, Syriac, Aramaic, and the other languages. Anyhow, Wycliffe thought, I'm going to make this translation into English. And he did. But in it, he had to look around for some words for Judaeus and Judaius. There was no English word because Judea had passed out of existence. There was no Judea. People had long ago forgotten that. So he, in the first translation, used a word in referring to Jesus as G-Y-U, Jew. The first translation of the Bible, of the Scriptures into English, Jesus was referred to as G-Y-U.
And when we start talking about the New World Order, we are not talking about these people at all. We're talking about these Khazar warriors that only pretended to embrace Judaism. And so today, we find that about 92% of the people who claim to be Jews really aren't. They don't have a drop of Semitic blood in their veins. They are Khazar warriors with a new bent on life and a goal to conquer, to rape, and to pillage. And that philosophy has come down over time, and we see how effectively they have implemented it throughout history. Now, when they pretended to embrace Judaism, they drew upon the real Jews for some education, and they used the Hebrew alphabet as phonics to codify their Khazar language. And so now we look at that language called Yiddish or Jiddish and find that it is not Hebrew. It only appears to be.
Let me show you what Oxford, let's see what they say about this so-called modern Hebrew. For more than 1700 years thereafter, Hebrew was comatose, either a sleeping beauty or walking dead. It served as a liturgical and literary language, and occasionally also as a lingua franca for Jews of the diaspora, but not as a mother tongue. The formation of Israeli, notice what it says, the formation of Israeli, the name I use for so-called modern Hebrew. So you see this Oxford scholar calling the so-called modern Hebrew Israeli. It says was facilitated at the end of the 19th century by Eliezer ben Yehuda, I mentioned him earlier, school teachers and others to further the Zionist cause. So he's sharing that the language that you are hearing being called Hebrew, and they use this to influence what is supposedly be called biblical Hebrew, is all politics to further the Zionist cause. Earlier during the Haskalah, in other words, Enlightenment period of the 1770s through the 1880s, writers such as Mendele Mokrze Safarim produced works in neologisms, which eventually contributed to Israeli. However, it was not until the beginning of the 20th century, notice what it says, it was not until the beginning of the 20th century that the language was first spoken. As a result of distinctive characters, such as the lack of a continuous chain of native speakers from Hebrew to Israeli, Israelis present the linguist with a unique laboratory experimenting in which to test a wider set of theoretical problems concerning language genesis and evolution. Indeed, the genetic classification of Israeli has preoccupied linguists from the beginning of the 20th century. The still prevalent traditional view suggests that Israeli is Semitic, in other words, Hebrew revived. Educators, scholars, and politicians have contributed to this assumption in their efforts to impose a nationalist narrative on linguistic reality. Revisionists counter that it is actually Indo-European Yiddish relexified, that is, Yiddish with Hebrew vocabulary. Come on, family. Am I not giving you sources? Israeli is a hybrid language, both Semitic and Indo-European. I argue that both Hebrew and Yiddish act equally as its primary contributors, accompanied by a plethora of other contributors such as Polish, Russian, German, Judeo-Spanish, in other words, Ladino, Arabic, English, and etc. These are all the contributions to what is being called modern Hebrew. Thus, the term Israeli is far more appropriate than Israeli Hebrew, let alone modern Hebrew or Hebrew to court. Yet, closer scrutiny challenges this perception. The victorious Hebrew may, after all, be partly Yiddish at heart. In other words, the foundation of it, what you hear today, is Yiddish. In other words, Yiddish survives beneath Israeli phonetics, phonology, syntax, lexis, and even morphology. Although traditional and institutional linguists have been reluctant to admit it. They know this is not ancient Hebrew, not even close to it. But they don't want to admit it. That's what he's saying here. Although traditional and institutional linguists have been reluctant to admit it.
They took a great deal of control, especially in Spain and Portugal. So much so that they were discovered in conspiracy because they worked together to get themselves, one of them, into a position of authority where that person can work in tandem with others to get more of their people in authority and positions of power, and working it up to where they're running the show and milking everybody else. After they fled down into Europe, there was one of them, a guy by the name of Meyer Amschel Bauerberg, who decided to enter into clandestine world government. Meyer Amschel Bauerberg used the symbol outside of his father's silversmith shop, a large red shield, as inspiration for an alias. And he went by the name of Rothschild. That's German language for red shield. Now, Rothschild was born in 1743, and when he was in his late 20s, he formulated a financial enterprise with 12 other entrepreneurs with the dedication, with the interest and the intent of conquering everybody and everything.
I mean, anti-Semitic statements are never good for anybody, right? It's kind of like being anti-black.
But, you know, it's really interesting. I didn't realize that I could be considered anti-Semitic till I read one of the definitions of anti-Semitism. Look at this. The definition says, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as a collective, such as, especially, but not exclusively. This sounds like I'll let them go by. What was that? All right, so it says, think about it, that sounds like the type wording that's in the contracts, right?
Indeed.
Okay, it says, such as, especially, but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions.
But isn't that what you said? That Jews run everything?
Yeah, but that actually is considered to be anti-Semitic.
Right.
So I didn't realize that it was anti-Semitic to say, hey, I have a Jewish attorney, I have a Jewish record label, I have a Jewish contractor, I have a
Do you regret your statements?
Or the statements you think you should be walking back? I mean, considering...
What do you mean walking back?
Well, backing up off of them. I mean, the thing is, you've lost a lot of endorsements. People are dropping you. You're getting, vilified. I mean, you might think you're right, but I think, there's a whole world out there that's condemning you for what you said.
Okay, so this right here is a chart of Universal Studios, 20th Century Fox, ABC News, CBS News, Columbia Pictures, Warner Brothers, ESPN Sports, Fox News, Washington Post, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, MTV Music Television, Nickelodeon, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Comedy Central, NBC Entertainment, Google, what else do we have? Disney, ABC Kids and Family, YouTube, Los Angeles Times, Discovery Network, Paramount Pictures, Facebook, Huffington Post, Yahoo, Marvel, Hulu, Cosmopolitan, Time, Touchstone, Associated Press, Pixar, Miramax, HBO, New York Post, LucasArts, MSNBC, DreamWorks Animation. Now, the thing is, I skipped over maybe about 5 of them because it was just unclear on this list. The red are the executives that are Jewish at these companies.
Do you think they stuck together when they heard what you said? Is that what happened?
To all my Jewish friends, my Jewish brothers and sisters, stand tall. Stand tall. Do not let this fear, this sadness, this anxiety, and this dread overwhelm you. Draw strength from your family, from your friends, from your ancestors, and the worldwide bond that we share that has always put the battery in your back. We're used to being looked at as different because that's what we are. We are different, and that's a good thing. I know that Jews are looked at as weak, but we're stronger than you can imagine. That's why you hurl propaganda. We control all the money. We control all the money. We control all the money. We control the media because it's plausible. It's plausible because we're just that good. Smart, compassionate, moral, and strong people. And we need to stand taller than ever against all those sick, dumb, uneducated black tar in their blood who hate Jews because they ain't. You hate us because you ain't us.
We're finishing now part 2, chapter 2. And what we've said so far is that people have free will and their actions are, some are good and some are evil. And by the way, the Rambam writes explicitly that everyone has some good actions and some bad actions. Everyone. Everyone. And he takes it for granted that there'll be a variety. And we talked about the fact that this world and the next world are asymmetrical. The next world is where the majority of a person's actions, which determine his identity, are compensated. For the righteous, they exist in the world to come and they're rewarded. And for those whose major complexion is black, are excluded from the world to come.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was black. Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.